Hi, this is Tara. Welcome to Sky Gazing. Today we're studying Sutra number 49. Let's get to it. Śruta-anumāna-prajñābhyām-anya-viṣayā viśeṣa-arthatvāt. Shruta, that which is heard, oral transmission, anumana, inference, prajñābhyām, from the two types of consciousness, anya, other, viśeṣa, sense object, viśeṣa-arthatvāt, because of having a particular object. So in Maharishi Vedavyasa's commentary, the 49th sutra is translated as, it has different objects from those of verbal and inferential cognition as it refers to particulars. So just to remind you that he is referring to, when he says it, what is he referring to? He is referring to truth-bearing knowledge. Okay, truth-bearing knowledge. Which is Sutra number 48. So here he is discussing the atoms and the purushas, okay, and they are of the nature of independent particularities, because being substances, they are all separate from each other, okay. All those that are separate from each other, being substances, are of the nature of independent peculiarities. Say an object, okay, say a grain of sugar, a grain of salt, a person. Thus, by this inference and by authority, the special province of the essential cognition is defined, because otherwise there would remain a doubt as to its real nature, brought about by ordinary reasoning. Still, the attempt to define it is not complete, and its existence is brought within the sphere of consciousness with difficulty on account of its being far removed from ordinary objects by inference and authority. So, verbal cognition refers to knowledge received from another. It has the generals for its objects. It is not possible to describe the particular by words. Why? Because there is no conventional denotation of the particular by words. The knowledge derived from the scriptures is general, does not give particulars, because the word has not its usage based on the particulars. Similarly, inferential knowledge denotes the general, not the specific. The access to knowledge is limited to its approach. Okay. So what he's saying is, he's over here, Maharishi Vedavyasa is also responding to a question, where he's saying, if the particulars, throughout the Patanjali's Yogasutras, Vedavyasa raises objections that have not been asked and answers them as a way of clearing doubts before they arise. So here he raises the question, if the particulars are not such objects as can be known by verbal, inferential, and perceptive cognitions, then there is no authority for their existence. So for this reason, he says, nor can it be said that the particular does not exist for want of authority. The meaning is that a means of knowledge, pramana, is neither coexistent with nor the cause of the thing known. A thing does not exist just because you don't know it. That is not the cause of it not existing. So he is raising these questions and answering them, but Swami Satyananda Saraswati will explain this far more simply to us. This knowledge, and by simply I don't mean that he dumbs it down. I think what Swami Satyananda, if you notice, gives a lot of context. He gives the before, the after. He gives you a lot of additional knowledge, but he phrases it in a way that, even a beginner can understand, which I'm very grateful for. So he says this knowledge is different from the knowledge, this knowledge meaning truth-bearing knowledge. Previous sutra. This knowledge is different from the knowledge acquired through testimony and inference because it has a special object. So he says consciousness is of two types, lower and higher. The lower depends upon the senses. We cannot see or hear without eyes or ears. This is Shruta and Anumana based. There are two ways of knowing higher consciousness. One is direct as Vedanta, the other is indirect. You hear about Atman from the Guru or from the scriptures. Shruta means the Vedas because they were revealed. Through them, we know the Supreme Being and Atman. Anumana is inference. We can have knowledge about unperceivable things through inference. Through inference, we know that there should be a creator of the world. This inference is based on theology, ontology, and cosmology. So knowledge from inference and testimony, Swami Satyananda says, differs from individual to individual. That is why there are clashes between individuals and nations and societies. But realize people do not differ in the supreme knowledge. All of this basically is the mutable knowledge. It is the knowledge that is gained through perception. This, the realized individual who's carrying truth-bearing knowledge, there is no differentiation. So the sensations carried through the indriyas are different, but supreme knowledge is one. That is the purpose of this sutra. So the difference between the high and lower consciousness is that the former sees things directly as they are, whereas the latter depends upon the senses. So knowledge based on information, whether it's from a person or from a book, is not enough. This is indirect knowledge, a lower kind of knowledge. The second type is direct knowledge. It is not classical, but actual. He who has seen the self cannot speak about it, although he has direct knowledge of Atman, because it is not a subject of speech and mind. So if you had to summarize this sutra into just, a very simple concept, it is that once you achieve truth-bearing knowledge, it is inherently indescribable. And because it is indescribable, does not mean, or inexpressible through the senses, does not mean, therefore, it does not exist. Okay, is basically what Patanjali is trying to tell you. The spiritual nature of consciousness can be known through self-experience. Lower consciousness has two phases, the indriyas or senses and buddhi. So all this analysis, all this perception, all the logical mind, the reach of the logical mind can give you knowledge of various kinds. But then that stops there. And if you really want knowledge that is expansive and beyond the limits of the known mind, you have to reach a place where it is not going to be quantifiable, right? And just because it's not quantifiable doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That is not your inability to perceive it is not the cause of its non-existence. Swami Vivekananda says, the knowledge that is gained from testimony and inference is about common objects. That from the samadhi just mentioned is of much higher order, being able to penetrate where inference and testimony cannot go. This is what yesterday, when we were talking about Ritambara and Satya, he says that, see the next sutra. So this is what he's referring to. He says the idea is that we have to get our knowledge of ordinary objects by direct perception and by inference therefrom. And from the testimony of people who are competent. By people who are competent, the yogis always mean the rishis or the seers. So according to them, the only proof of the scriptures is that they were the testimony of competent persons. Yet they say the scriptures cannot take us to realization. We can read all the Vedas, yet we will not realize anything. But when we practice their teachings, then we attain to that state which realize what the scriptures say, which penetrates where reason cannot go and where the testimony of others cannot avail. This is what is meant by this aphorism, that realization is the real religion. All your listening, all your talking, all your debate, all your discussion, all your extrapolation, all your inferential reasoning is not realization. Okay, so it's only preparing the ground. It is not religion. It is not intellectual assent and intellectual dissent. These are not what are religion, Swami Vivekananda says. The central idea of the yogis is that just as we come in direct contact with the objects of the senses, so religion can be directly perceived in a far more intense sense. The truths of religion as God and soul cannot be perceived by the external senses. I cannot see God with my eyes, nor can I touch him with my hands. And we also know that neither can we reason beyond the senses. So he says reason leaves us at a point quite indecisive. We may reason all our lives as the world has been doing for thousands of years, and the result is that we find we are incompetent to prove or disprove the facts of religion. What we perceive directly, we take as the basis, and upon that basis, we reason. So it's obvious that reasoning has to run within the bounds of perception. It can never go beyond. The whole scope of realization, therefore, is beyond sense perception. The yogis say that man can go beyond his direct sense perception and beyond his reason also. So that is simply put. B.K. Iyengar says, the truth-bearing knowledge and wisdom is distinct from and beyond the knowledge gleaned from books, testimony, and inference. So truth-bearing knowledge is first-hand intuitive knowledge. The wisdom gained through it is insight. Special direct knowledge from the soul and not from perception, senses, or from ordinary intellect. Hence, it has a particular property of its own. The knowledge that springs from one's inner self is intuitive knowledge. It's also known as listening to the inner voice. So, B.K. Iyengar asks you to compare this sutra, sutra number 49, with sutra number 7, okay, in the Samadhipada, in which Patanjali says, you need to verify your perception through logic and through śruta and anumāna. Okay, so it's almost like he's saying the exact opposite. Why? B.K. Iyengar says that now at the end of this chapter, the sadhaka may be judged to be of a ripe and cultured mind. His perceptions have an independent validity requiring no verification from other sources. So an ordinary man has free will in the sense that he experiences choice and must find his way by discrimination or viveka. So the enlightened sadhaka, which he's assuming we are, having left duality behind, which he's assuming we have done, or is hoping, experiences only his own will, which transcends the hesitation of choice. This is the intelligence of sattva in sattva. So those of you who have skipped the previous episodes and are listening to this directly, I would highly recommend going back and listening to it from the beginning, because as we see, even with the teachings of the Buddha, even with a lot of these enlightened rishis, they adapt their teachings. It's not that they have inherent contradictions or that they don't know what they're saying. They're really calibrating their teachings to the maturity of the audience. So they can tell you exactly the opposite thing. Within 50 sutras, the instruction is exactly the opposite. Why is that? Because he's hoping that you have followed those 49 sutras and you've come to this point, 48 sutras, and you've come to the 49th, and therefore you have taken a specific learning curve, which now says, okay, now you're free to go and do this. Okay, so he's trusting us with this teaching, and we have to honor that trust. Osho says, in the state of nirvichara samadhi, an object is experienced in its full perspective, because in this state, knowledge is gained direct without the use of senses. Knowledge is indirect, knowing is direct. Knowledge is through many mediums, it is not reliable. Knowing is immediate, without any medium, only knowing can be reliable. And Osho says, remember this distinction. Knowledge is like a messenger who comes, he may have misunderstood the message, he may have added something of his own to the message, he may have a particular lens, he may have forgotten something in the message. So you don't have any direct approach to the source of the message. This is knowledge. Knowledge is not reliable. And not only one messenger is involved in the knowledge, but 4. If you take this study of the sutras, there are 6 bhashyas and 1 interpreter of 6 bhashyas, which are interpretations of Vedavyasa's original text, which is an interpretation of Patanjali, which is an interpretation of the original yoga. Therefore, what you're receiving is an extremely, extremely diluted and I would say corrupted end product. Therefore, this can at best be a direction. It can, a road sign by the side of this road. Ultimately, each one's journey is their own, and you cannot use anything that you are perceiving as a final stamp, as a final authority, as the text by which you must proceed. You may find out something through your own direct experience which completely contradicts everything you have just heard. And if that is so, then you should use just that. Okay. So basically, he says consciousness is not rooted in the body is just an abode. As you come out of your house and go in, consciousness can come out of the house and go in. Only consciousness can come out of this whole mechanism and look at things and see what's happening. In Nirvichara Samadhi, he says this is what happens. Thought sees, connection between the mind and the consciousness is cut because thought is the connection. Without thought, you don't have a mind. And when you don't have a mind, the connection with the brain is broken. When you don't have any mind and the connection with the brain is broken, the connection with the nervous system is broken, your consciousness can now float in and out, all doors are open. Sounds absolutely frightening. In Nirvichara Samadhi, when thought sees, consciousness is free to move and float. It becomes like a cloud without any roots, without any home. Something my teacher always says is, we all say very easily, I want enlightenment. She says, be very careful what you ask for because you might get it. So it becomes free of the mechanism you have lived with. It can come out, it can go in. There is no hindrance on its path. So, do we even have a concept of what we're asking for when we say, oh, I'm on this path, I'm on the spiritual path, I'm practicing yoga, I'm practicing all my sadhanas, my meditation. To what end? Do we even understand to what end? Which is why, when Patanjali wrote the Yogasutras, the chitta vritti nirodha is upfront. He's telling you this is what is going to happen. You have to understand what you're getting in for when you practice yoga. Because if you just practice, as many people do today, thinking it's acrobatics, it's calisthenics, it's exercise, it's an Olympic sport. See, the thing is, these are going to shape and direct you in a specific direction. Just like they say, chanting the Gayatri Mantra is going to create a sense of dissociation in you. Something changes in your body, something changes in your chitta the more you practice yoga. B.K. Sengar, for instance, says that the longer that you hold the asana, buddhi rises to the surface, right? The buddhi rises from the unconscious to the conscious level. So there are actual changes that happen in your body, mind, and spirit when you're practicing yoga. So you have to understand and direct it in the correct way. Otherwise, it can go very, very wrong if it is done without understanding. So he says now direct knowledge is possible, direct knowledge is knowing. There is no intermediary. So when you come out of your prison of senses, nervous system, brain, mind, layers of walls, suddenly individuals disappear. A vast energy, which is why the lower consciousness is the particular, the higher consciousness is the general. A vast energy in millions of forms, and every form indicating towards the formless, and every form melting and merging into other forms. A vast ocean of formless beauty, truth, and goodness. Hindus call it Sat Chit Ananda. That which is beautiful, that which is good, that which is blissful. This is direct perception. Aproksha anubhuti, immediate knowing. And he says the most beautiful metaphor that he has come across, Osho, is a mirror facing a mirror, and one mirror mirrors another, the other mirrors this mirror. There's nothing in the mirror, only mirroring reflected millions of times into each other. Barbara Stoller Miller says it has a different scope than scriptural or inferential knowledge because its object is singular. In seed-bearing contemplation, Sabija, the knowledge that spirit and material nature are fundamentally distinct is acquired through rational and intuitive means which depend on memory. Contemplation without seed, nirbija, is hyperconscious condition in which thought is calm and totally integrated so that it leaves no seeds to mature into further thoughts. The state of consciousness is wisdom realized without intellectual activity. Patanjali here contrasts this wisdom with the teachings of sacred texts and knowledge based on experience, which are fundamentally discursive and generate further thought. The extraordinary nature of this wisdom allows thought to flow while blocking the formation of new impressions, finally rendering itself superfluous in an absolute cessation of thought. It's kind of like what they say with yoga. Yoga uses rajas to subdue rajas. So we are basically using this knowledge, this wisdom, the shruta, the anumana, to subdue it and to negate it. We are using the chitta to negate the chitta. So we are reaching for that point of complete cessation. Thank you so much for listening. Sutra number 49. Come back tomorrow for Sutra number 50.